Today I want to talk about guitar players and how they often want to sound like other guitar players, namely their heroes. So if somebody's really into Steve Vai, they might want to sound like Steve Vai. If they know of Steve Vai, they probably know of Joe Satriani, because these guys almost come as a pair. You know, they grew up together. Satriani taught Vai, and they've gone on to play music with each other throughout their careers. And people often say that they want to sound like these guys, or this guy on one day, or this guy on another day, depending on the flavour of the month. And, you know, pick your hero. If it's Satriani, Vai, Ingmar Malmsteen, Jeff Beck, Marty Friedman, whomever is your inspiration, you're never going to sound like them. And there's all these videos on the internet that say, you know, how to play like Steve Vai and things like this. And I want to talk about how valuable that is, because there is some value to it, but the limits of that, the constraints of where there is value to be found in emulating somebody else. Learn their pieces, learn their techniques, find out what they do to produce the sound they produce if you like it. But the key thing is to incorporate it into your playing. Your playing. Don't try and become their playing. And that's really what I want to talk about. So let's say, I mean, for me, Steve Vai is the obvious place to go, because I've always been a Vai fan. I have lots of his equipment. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that. I have more than one legacy amplifier. I have his Gemini distortion, and I have his signature guitar up there, and his preamp there. But in terms of the sound I have right now, Vai is less incorporated into it than you would think. These are Evos. I like his pickups, but pickups don't do a great deal to shape a sound. I could have any pickups in here, and if this whole setup was different, I wouldn't sound anything like Vai. I'm using his amp, not to the same EQ that he does. I'm using, in the chain right now, a reverb which he doesn't use, and a booster which he doesn't use. So this sound doesn't, in truth, sound very much like Steve Vai. And I've done that just because that's how I play, and also it's useful for this video for me not to try and sound like Vai, because what I'm going to try and show you is how to incorporate the flavour of a guitar player rather than their playing, if that makes sense. So some people will sit down and want to learn Vai and go, okay, I'm going to kick in my Gemini distortion, I'm going to turn on my delay, because Vai uses delay, and I'm going to and you'll think, yes, it sounds like what he does live. It sounds more like the live sound than the recorded sound, and people get very, you know, hung up on the minutiae and the details of how to sound like Vai through their gear, through playing the same songs as them, through trying to emulate his vibrato or whatever it is. Stop doing it. Take all that stuff off. Let's take off the delay, take off the overdrive. Let's have a bland, plain guitar sound. This is just, everything's virtually at new, and there's a little bit more treble. And let's just take something it might be something that Vai might utilize, but it's not Vai. So let's take the Lydian scale. We need Lydian. I'm going to use that for all of our examples as kind of a control variable for any of you scientists out there. So if I wanted to sound like Vai right now, if I wanted to put a flavour of Vai in, which is the key thing, we're not trying to be Vai, because nobody sounds like Vai does, and I am not going to sound as good as Vai ever, especially if I try to be him. But I can use some of his styles and motifs to my benefit, and you'll think it sounds a bit Vai-ish. So I think you'll probably agree that sounded quite Vi-ish. Why? I'm not using really the same tools that he does in terms of gear to any significant degree. I'm not playing one of his pieces. I'm just doodling around in E Lydian. Lydian is kind of associated with Vi, but it could be associated with anyone. He has written a piece in E Lydian. Maybe he's written more than just... I'm sure he's played in E Lydian more than on just that record. That was Computer Wii. But what was the thing that made what I did sound Vi-ish? They were motifs. They were the kind of things that he does. So if you want to sound a bit Vi-ish, if you enjoy that sound, play modally. He likes Dorian, he likes Lydian, and he uses those colours in an effective way. But a lot of people do. A lot of people do. That's the thing. The best things about these guitar players are things that you could apply to lots of guitar players. If you try and copy something that is too specific to them, it's something that you must use in moderation. For example, that sweeping pattern is something I've heard nobody but Vi do, where he sweeps downwards and then slides somewhere else. So, you know, he'll move up to... Whether it's because he's just comfortable sweeping down more than sweeping up, who knows, but it's something that he does all the time, and if you do it, you'll think, well, that sounds like Vi, because it's a very Vi technique. Sure, use it now and again. You could use it as an homage to him. So he was an inspiration to me. I've used that technique that I've picked up from him. But use those techniques sparingly, because otherwise you will start to sound like an emulation. What you can use and should use liberally are the general ingredients that make up the flavour of the Vi sound. And that might be said to be his method of sliding, his method of bending, but even that doesn't really address the issue. Everybody slides, everybody bends. I think the thing that makes Vi sound fluid and formless is the timing. So when he does a sliding passage, it's kind of off kilter. There's a lot of notes in between beats and off beats. So if I were just to improvise something and inject those slides that are Vi-ish in nature, kind of off kilter and formless, it'll sound like I've made an inflection of Vi, maybe, but it won't sound like I'm ripping him off. So let me demonstrate. So you see what I mean? There were some slides in there that you could hear in a Vi piece, but it wasn't a Vi piece. It was a whatever I just did piece. It was a me piece, which is taken from lots of guitar players. So let's carry on with E Lydian and see to whom else we can apply it, because it doesn't sound like Vi just because Vi owns the mode or something. So let's take. That wasn't in the same key as the original, I don't think, but many of you will recognise that as the melody from Flying in a Blue Dream by Joe Satriani, which is Lydian in modality in sections of it. So that recognisability is there, and the reason you can sound like Satriani in Lydian is because you change the technique. You start kind of doing things that are idiomatic to him. He plays straighter than Vi, rhythmically, I would say. He utilises more legato, his playing is more conjunct, less angular. If any of those terms don't mean anything to you, most of them are actual musical terms, you could look them up. Disjunct, Vi's playing is very disjunct in the sense that his melodies have a lot of gaps in between them, scalically. His playing is angular in the sense that it's often awkward to get your fingers around. It might not necessarily be very fast passage, or it might not sound super difficult to do, but it's awkward, whereas Satriani's impressive runs are often not that awkward. It's just a kind of burst of athleticism. So if I were going to try and incorporate some Satchisms into another improvisation in the same key, it might sound something like this. And why does that sound like Satch? There's a little more repetition in the melody, there's a little more to get a hold of, if you like. The kind of, it wasn't a great melody, but it was a hook of a kind in the beginning. Those kind of straight melodies, well intonated, are the kinds of things that Satriani does. The legato runs that he does, he does those a lot, going back on himself, ending on a pinky, kind of running down these things in a pattern, scalically and in sequence, is part of the thing that makes Satriani songs so catchy. He's a great user of sequences and of repetition in an artistic way, and it means that his songs people usually describe as song-like. They're like guitar songs, whereas a lot of other guitar players who spend more of the time soloing or noodling around or having more kind of complex, developed melodies, posh way of saying that they go all over the place, are less memorable, and a lot of people like Satriani for that. So if you want to sound, if you like, again, that flavour that Satriani brings to the table of something more easily digestible, easy to understand, sweet sounding, memorable, then take some of the ingredients of what he does, observe what he does holistically, and take out the bits that you like and incorporate them into your own playing. So those were two players who have used Elidian many times in the past and will do so again in the future, so it wasn't very difficult to apply their style to this exercise. What if we take a player like Malmsteen? To the best of my knowledge, not a big user of the Lydian mode, a harmonic minor guy, a neoclassical guy. Still, we can take out some of the stylistic elements of his playing, some of the things idiomatic to the Malmsteen style, and incorporate them into this Elidian exercise. So what would Malmsteen do typically to get us off the ground? That's a good question. I don't know, something like that. If we were to use the same run, in the same rhythm, in the same scalic pattern, but in our Elidian jam, it's going to sound very different, but we still know where we stole it from. Another Malmsteenism is the three-string sweep, and he usually employs a diminished triad for this purpose, and moves it up and down the fretboard. Something like that. If you want to do a Malmsteenism in the Lydian thing, I snuck it in there, that's fine, it works. So let's just stick with Malmsteen for a moment in his world of harmonic minor. I'm pretty sure he's copyrighted it by now. And what he often does is uses a pedal note in the style of Bach, like so. And you can use that in the Elidian thing, so let's be Malmsteen Bach in Elidian. On a side note, you may have noticed, you may not, I'm not using much gain. If you always play with loads of gain, do try and knock it back and play the same style with lower gain, because you'll be surprised at how much more of a scope of dynamics and of soundscape you open by knocking back the gain. the recently sadly passed away Eddie Van Halen used less gain than a lot of people would presume, and that was how he was able to get the dynamic variation by using his volume control on his guitar. So you listen to Hot for Teacher, for example. Nothing changes on the amp, just whacks up the volume on the guitar. And you've got all this big, powerful sound. My gain is 11 o'clock. It's really not that high. Again, this is an example of how you can achieve something that the greats do without having to emulate them. Having a good volume control is not something that you have to sound like Van Halen to do. You can use the Eddie Van Halen principle of tempering your gain and utilising your volume control. You can thank him for it, you can thank him for giving you the idea, but you don't have to sound like him. You can use it in whatever context you want. So Marty Friedman, best known probably for his work in Megadeth and now a solo artist living in Japan, and that is a key part of his musical personality really. Japanese music is jazzy really in Western terminology. The kind of chord progression you'd hear in a Japanese pop song is the kind of thing that you would only hear in Western jazz, and that has very much affected and influenced Marty Friedman's playing in that he incorporates many more jazz tonalities and accidental notes. Accidental, technically he does them on purpose of course, and you'll hear that as far back as his Megadeth playing. So if I were to try and play Elydian by Marty Friedman, so there I was ringing the hell out of some accidental notes. I was missing out the middle of scales, so you get that kind of spaced out pentatonic feel, and using the kind of outside notes that you wouldn't usually use. People usually default to either minor pentatonic or they will add in the natural minor notes. But if you want to get that Friedmanite Japanesey type sound, then you need to do precisely the reverse in a lot of cases, and use the outside notes more often. And it's that kind of slight dissonance and bends and resolution that make it feel different, make it sound a little more out there. Just think of the Tornado of Souls solo, what he does with his bends. Just that the first place he starts on the fretboard is not in key. Tornado of Souls is... he plays a B flat when we're in B, like the whole time. But to be Friedman, you're going to need to start on an outside note and bend into where you want to be. And you can use that inflection. It's a small detail and it gives you a little bit of a flavour, another ingredient to use in your own playing. Incorporate it into your arsenal. So you're a massive Joe Walsh, Don Felder fan, can't get enough of the Eagles. You've just finished listening to your favourite riff from Life in the Fast Lane. And you think, well, what makes them them? What gives them that great country, blues, soft rock sound that has sold so many millions of records, and you want to incorporate a bit of that flavour into your playing. Well, I can't say I've ever heard the Eagles playing E Lydian, but there's no reason we can't use that style of a bend that ends before it's resolved, or ends halfway through the bend in our jam. What about Michelangelo Batio? How can such a machine of a man have a place in my playing? His style is so precise that we don't have any wiggle room. If I'm going to play his exercises, I'm going to sound like him. Bro, it's even easier to use Michelangelo Batio's techniques in your playing because they're not stylistically tremendously strong, and that's not a bad thing. It's just an observation on his playing that he is so precise and clinical that the thing that makes him unique is precisely that. He's musical, he's a good composer, he's an amazing player, but there's no one sound that you think that's a Batio sound, apart from that it is crystal clear and pure, and that probably comes from his background as a classical pianist, and he has a great focus on virtuosity and being able to do things that other people can't do, and that represents itself in this incredibly precise playing. It's difficult to sound like him, it's very difficult to sound like him because he is just so precise. I'm not Michelangelo Batio, but I can use the influence, the time that I spent watching his Speed Kills DVDs of his precise picking, and actually the way that I pick was very much influenced by Michelangelo Batio. I have this anchor here so that I find string skipping easier. You can switch between strings, you can, I think, pick with more of a stability if you do this. I don't do it all the time, it depends what I'm doing, but if I feel like I want that stability, that goes down. That's quite a natural thing for me to do now, as I see a lot of people pick with quite a clenched fist, and that for me it introduces quite a lot of tension, and I think it leaves kind of a bit of too much of a, I don't know if I had an analogy I think put out by Malmsteen of like a tennis player. The tennis player wants to be in the middle of the court waiting for the ball to come back, so Malmsteen has these really small movements, and I think part of that applies to the MAB principle as well. He doesn't make huge movements, and the stability there of the tennis player with both feet planted waiting for the ball, which side to go. The feet spread apart and planted to me is representative of the anchor, and that they stay in the middle of the court waiting for which side they're going to go is representative of the minimal movement that you want in picking. So there's a lot to learn from all these people. You don't need to try and sound like them. You can just incorporate their wisdom into your playing. So like I said, use these snippets of the guitar greats playing like they're flavours or ingredients. You can use an egg and a lemon to make a béarnaise sauce, but you can use the same ingredients to make a lemon drizzle cake. That's all I'm saying. So, anyway, have fun. See you in the next one.